Greetings to Barcelona and greetings to PAIMM on this 25th anniversary of your wonderful service. I'm going to talk today about my research and about what I see as happening to doctors over the last few decades since it all began. In 1983, two very angry young doctors came to see me. I was working for the Medical Research Council, which was a unit that looked at working conditions and the effects on people's health. Two of these doctors' colleagues had killed themselves in the last 2 weeks, and no one in their team, no senior doctor, no manager, had actually talked to them about it. I was interested then in the way that individual and organisational factors affected the psychological health of staff, and so I decided to look at the doctors. I studied 314 of them when they were fourth-year medical students. I looked at stress levels, family background, self-criticism, etc. And again 2 years later when they became junior hospital doctors. That way I could consider the individual factors when they were not under stress and then see which of these mattered most when they began that difficult first postgraduate year. The BMJ published my first papers, and these created considerable publicity in Britain. From then on, I got funding, and I could look at and follow up all these doctors over the next 2 decades. The study produced very many papers and chapters and books. Good things have come from the realization that doctors can get sick too, and also that their condition might affect patient care. So PAIMM was developed in Barcelona, and another centre opened in Oslo. And eventually a very busy service came to London. People were shocked there when the London clinic was first opened because immediately there were so many doctors with alcohol and drug problems. But not all that's happened for the best over those 35 years. The status of doctors has changed, partly because of the publicity of accidents and at least 2 murderous doctors in the UK. The special conditions which were given to hospital doctors, such as having their own canteens and things, have now largely vanished. And today in the UK, we are having strikes that seem to be going nowhere. The UK government, that's been in power for 13 long years, has steadily reduced resources for all healthcare, along with other public services, while at the same time trying to control the ways that medicine is delivered, not always well. In addition, patient expectations grow each year, as they do around the world, and also populations are older too. And the era of COVID means that we have unhappy healthcare staff who are often very exhausted and that have been unrewarded for their hard work and the enormous risks that they took. Also around the world, we see staff shortages. In the UK, we still poach nurses and doctors from abroad, but this is getting less because we've lost so many staff when we sadly left the European Union. The rise in women doctors is a good thing, I'm all for it, but it does mean that sometimes this increases shortages because women still bear the greatest responsibility for being at home when they have young children. In the UK, there's actually a move away from the coast and away from the country hospitals and country practices. And these doctors are moving far more to the big hospitals in the cities. And this makes actually living at the coast quite dangerous for many British patients. And so doctors migrate to countries as well where they get better pay and better lifestyle, like Australia. Well, I do wonder whether we actually need to start changing medicine quite fundamentally, maybe increasing the physician assistants as they've done in the United States. But some things never change. People are still people, and so doctors come with all the same idiosyncrasies and psychogenic problems that many of us approach life with. In addition, some organisations still create major problems for their staff when they're badly managed. And our government hasn't helped people to manage well, because we pressurise our managers with targets and things like that. And it takes a very good manager to do their best for their staff, despite all these government pressures. I'm going to give you a few of the key findings from my study over the years, about 20 years in all. These, for example, are the individual risk factors that I've found in various parts of the study that have appeared from the measurements which were taken as students and then followed up at different points throughout the career. Depression as students, especially for men, predicted psychological problems later. Not that surprising, perhaps. Losing a parent before adolescence was a risk factor. High alcohol use in students, especially in women, and that actually continued. If women drank quite a lot as students, they went on drinking quite a lot. Female hospital doctors with children. Children make no difference to the stress levels of male doctors, but they do of female doctors. Older fathers, especially males. So this might not be a factor now, because on the whole, most people seem to have older fathers, and I suspect it isn't the problem it was in this era, which is a generation and a half ago. And this was particularly a problem for males in my data. And also strict or critical fathers. Also, I think that fathers are probably less strict and critical than they were for my population. High self-criticism or perfectionism. This was a really big predictor of depression over the years, and again measured as students, so perhaps not so to be expected to stay quite such a strong predictor. Coping by denial or avoidance, their coping strategies, or saying it just didn't exist, that went on not being a good thing. And of course, complaints or litigation once they actually became doctors. So that was, as it is everywhere, a major cause of depression. In Britain, we have quite a few doctors who actually do commit suicide when they're under investigation for litigation. This slide shows Pamela Baldwin's findings from a similar study she did that followed a few years after mine. These were medical students' scores of psychological stress and then their careers that they later went into. You can see that those who later entered psychiatry had the highest scores as students, while those who later became surgeons had the lowest. Low stress scores in surgeons continue. It's a very common finding. Their main problems, they reported to me, were the patients and the other staff, surprisingly. But again, you can see that early individual differences affect even the careers that we enter. So those were some of the individual factors that affect doctors over time, measured when they were students. But then they do enter organisations, and these are some of the organisational factors that also affect their stress and depression, and which of course are much easier to change in lots of ways. The quality of the team that you're in has a huge effect on how you feel, as you can see from this. Those with poorer team membership scores have higher levels of psychological distress, and vice versa. Nowadays, young doctors hardly even know which team they're in. We don't have much teamwork going on anymore. But we found that if a doctor was unsure of what team they were in, their stress levels were significantly higher. This is one of my favourite slides to demonstrate the power of the organisation to affect staff well-being. These were all first-year graduates at the end of 6 months working in 13 hospitals in and around London. As you can see, their mean GHQ scores, stress scores, at Hospital A are almost twice the level of those at Hospital M. These are data that every hospital manager should be aware of. They can really make a difference to how their staff feel. And so they're really important. This is a rather complicated slide showing how I put together the core of my findings over time. On the left are all the well-known organisational causes of both psychological problems in staff and also poor performance. That's the very first box. The next box relates to particular stressors for doctors. Things like losing sleep, having poor relationships, not enough support, making mistakes, etc. But these are filtered through the quality of the team that they're working in. So some teams can protect the doctor from some of these stressors and some teams don't. They make the job either good or not so good. Those again are filtered through the doctor and his and her personality, their background and also their competencies. When these things go wrong, doctors suffer, or they try to stop suffering through alcohol or drugs. All this leads to poor patient care and possibly to litigation. The boxes at the bottom with the green arrows show all the ways that we can stop this happening at the different points, or we can treat it when it does happen. So we can improve management, we can create stronger teams, we can do preventive work for young doctors, and we can provide counselling and other interventions for those who suffer anyway. So to wind up, here are some of my conclusions from all these data and all these years. We have to tackle psychological problems and we have to lower our doctors' stress and depression levels. This is for the benefit of the doctor, of course, but also for the patients and resources. In addition, we do now have evidence about what causes the problems and also the strategies and treatments we can give to reduce them and to really help not only the doctors, but also their patients. So finally, I'd really like to thank all my friends at PAIMM and the lovely visits I've made to you over the years. And I want you to have another wonderful 25 years. All the best to everybody.